It's time for Michigan's newest sports talk show, Mitten Madness.
And here he goes. Defense win championship.
Michigan sports talk from here in Battle Creek. The latest stories, the biggest games, all across the Mitten State.
That's not something you play with.
Streaming live and on demand on the 95.3 WBCK app. Here are your hosts, Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes.
Hello there and good morning. It's Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes set to talk Michigan sports. And boy, are Michigan sports as good as they've been in a long, long time. Plenty to be excited about. We'll dive into as much as we're possibly able to do for the next hour, starting off with the Lions. And we'll finish up with our picks, taking care of all of those playoff games, which you'll be able to hear here on 95.3 WBCK. But before we get into all the conversation to be had, DJ, how's it going, man?
I'm all right. Life is good. New year, getting back into the groove of things. Sports are kind of just in the back of my mind at the moment. Michigan basketball doing just enough to keep me alive, but
probably made you want a dead fish the other night.
Oh, they saved my weekend. I'll tell you that much.
Okay.
I mean, my favorite lacrosse team just went out and embarrassed themselves. And then Michigan won, got me a little bit back on the up and up to only then be put back down in the dirt when the Packers did what they did in front of a live television audience.
That was rough, without a doubt. I've been trying to fill up WBCK with a little bit more sports content. So be sure to download the app, check that stuff out, and help me out in the process. But also, I mean, let's just acknowledge how incredible sports are right now in Michigan. Michigan and Michigan State basketball are both at the top of the Big Ten. They're playing fantastic. The Detroit Lions play later today against the Washington Commanders for the right to go to the NFC Championship. The Detroit Pistons have an all-star potential player and are above 500, might be in a position to make a playoff push. And the Detroit Red Wings are kind of in the same boat. Fired their head coach. New guy comes in. All of a sudden, they can play some offense. They got to shore up the defense just a tad bit. But, hey, I think you said they won 8 of their last 9 that we're aware of recording this on Friday. Michigan sports are out of this world. What better place, though, than to start with what's going to take place at 8 p.m. tonight in Ford Field with the Detroit Lions taking on the Washington Commanders. Now, historically, the Commanders have quite the lead on Detroit, or I should say the Washington football franchise has quite the lead on Detroit. Detroit has never beaten Washington in the playoffs. And in fact, the last time they met in the playoffs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was that NFC championship from back in the 90s, which sent Washington to the Super Bowl, sent Detroit on a very long playoff drought. Nonetheless, the Commanders have never beaten the Lions, so Detroit does have some type of advantage here. Outside of home field advantage, Ford Field's going to be rocking when the offensive rookie of the year, presumptively, Jaden Daniels, comes to town with a high-flying offense. I mean, is there any portion of what Washington does that concerns you I mean, maybe not to an extreme. I think everybody here anticipates that Detroit's going to win the game, DJ. But anything about Washington that you're like, that might be a sore spot that Detroit is going to struggle with?
I got to be honest, secondary and not their secondary, more so the Detroit Lions secondary. It is still hampered. It is still the weak point of this team. Even when they were healthy, teams were able to dot them up over top. I don't think that changes.
Yeah.
Jalen Daniels is an exceptional athlete. He's done an amazing job at bringing Washington back to what they feel they are as a program and always have been as a program. And a lot of that has to do with his arm and his ability to escape the pocket and extend plays. 2 things the Lions really struggle with: a quarterback that's able to extend plays due to the fact that they don't have that same pass rush that they had at the beginning of the year. And then they haven't really been able to cover receivers on the back end due to all of the injuries that they've had back there. The passing game for the Commanders could prove to be a problem, but the question is, can that Commanders offense actually score enough points to outscore the Detroit Lions offense, which is supposedly going to be 100% healthy with David Montgomery taking snaps during practice this week. We'll find out for sure tomorrow. But if they're 100% healthy, can you go out and score 44 points?
Yeah.
to beat the Detroit Lions.
It's almost like the Commanders have to replicate what the Buffalo Bills did a little over a month ago when they, I mean, all things being fair, they kind of put the bang thing on Detroit, and Detroit made it look better on the score sheet. But, you know, you've got to be able to really, really light up the scoreboard to beat Detroit, especially when their offense is 100%. I mean, just think about how ridiculous that is, because the Lions have one of the most ridiculously structured offenses in the NFL. Maybe only the Philadelphia Eagles can actually challenge it pound for pound, talent for talent. But, I mean, one of the best offensive lines in the league, two of the best running backs in the league, incredible wide receiving core, and a smart quarterback that understands that he's just so spoiled that if he screws up, there's no one to blame but him, because everything else around him works. And even when he does screw up, everything around him makes it so much easier to rebound and recover from that. The defense can be a little bit more problematic. The youth on the outside with the corners often supersedes the abilities of Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, who had, you know, all pro years. They were all pros, but that's one aspect that I think can be quite problematic. And I agree. If you look at the two teams that were able to beat Detroit this year, they employed Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen, two quarterbacks that know how to move around, extend plays, make the most out of every play, and make intelligent decisions with the football, with a proficient receiving core downfield that can take advantage of the youth and inexperience on the Detroit back end. So I agree. I mean, that's probably the one way that Washington wins, is by getting into a shootout with Detroit. And I think the smart thing for Washington, if they're able to pull that off, is that would force Detroit to not run the football. And Washington has like the third worst rushing defense in the NFL. They're horrid. They give up 137.5 yards per game throughout the 2024 season. And if you do that against Detroit, you're going to give up over 250 to the Lions between Sonic and Knuckles. So if Washington can elongate the game in a shootout, it's actually playing into their favor. I think even if Washington comes out lighting up the scoreboard, it's in Detroit's best interest to not scoreboard watch and try to think that they got to keep pace. They got to control the football game and run the ball with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has always been what they were looking to do this year, is to really set up their offense using the run. Like, if they're able to get 4 or 5 yards on first down, their whole playbook is open. If they're able to get large runs from Montgomery and Gibbs, you have to respect them. So the play action opens up. Or they start loading the box and you're just able to drop right back and throw something over top. When you have a strong running game, it opens up the rest of your offense, because they have to compensate for that. They have to take 2, 3, 4 players to sell the run and stop the run, which gives you space out on the rest of the field. So it all comes down to how well does the running game go for the Lions. It's not that they can't pass the ball. It's not that they don't have a competent quarterback. It's not that they don't have very good receivers and tight ends. But it comes down to the fact that resources get stretched thin when you have to abide by all parts of the offense. You have to watch their deep game in passing. You have to watch the intermediate and the middle routes over the middle, medium routes over the middle, but you also have to watch the short slants and the screens, the quick outs, while also saying, hey, they have 2 very good running backs in the backfield that we have to stop as well. So it just puts a lot of pressure on the defense when you have an extremely talented running game.
So we're going to pick the game later. Most people in this state are picking Detroit and assuming that they're going to move on and host the NFC Championship, which is going to be fantastic. Looking on the other side of the bracket with Los Angeles, the Rams taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. We don't have to get too much into that one because we're going to pick that game as well. But just from the standpoint of assuming Detroit reaches the NFC Championship as expected against the team, you know, Washington just doesn't have the experience. They're where Detroit was last year. They're exciting. They don't have the experience to maybe stand up to the situation. But the Rams and the Eagles have both been there, done that, and are both wildly capable of going to the NFC Championship. I feel like the Rams are that one team that Detroit probably doesn't want to play at home, but Philly has got one of the most geeked out rosters in the NFL. Do you have a preference as a Lions sympathizer, as somebody that wants to see the Lions do something something special in 2025. Do you have a preference of one of those teams to come over to Ford Field and play the Lions next week if Detroit advances?
All right, I will say this. As a Detroit adjacent and someone living in Michigan, I want to see the people around me happy. So I would love to see them play the Rams because I think they have a better chance of beating the Rams. Like, I think that game is more manageable for them. I think there's less red flags and concerns in that game than there are if you play the Eagles. But personally, someone who works for a company that is based out of Philadelphia in my own time, it would be very good for the Eagles to make it to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to really whoever comes out of that other game. I think it's going to be exciting regardless who comes out of that other game. And it's going to be right here at Ford Field. Like, it all just screams excitement regardless who you want to see. But coming down to Lions and who they would like to see, it's probably going to be the Rams.
The Rams scare me, man. I look at their 10-7 record and don't care. I think just the way that their offense is built up and the makeup of that team, they don't have all the superstars that Philly has. But, man, they know how to win football games, especially this time of year, and that's what makes them so dangerous. It's a big reason why they won the Super Bowl several years ago. Nonetheless, that would either way, the narratives there are insane. An NFC championship against Matthew Stafford would sell very well. Philly and Detroit would sell very well. Very like-minded kind of attitudes with the prides that they have with their teams. If you don't already have tickets to go watch the game later tonight, don't bother. I'm reading this at 121 the day before. I imagine ticket prices are even worse. Average ticket price to get into Ford Field to watch this NFC divisional matchup against the Washington Commanders, $855. Congrats. That is absurd. We'll come back next and talk Pistons. It's a little bit cheaper to watch the Pistons, but hey, at least they're playing a lot better. We'll talk about them next here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. Back here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK, Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes. It's time to talk some Pistons. This was once one of the more difficult segments to get through because it was always like, well, what do the Pistons need to do now? This time last year, DJ, the Pistons were 4-37. Now they're 21-20. Was watching some videos with Cade Cunningham and, catching up on what's going on with the team, and he mentioned something along the lines of this might be the most wins he's had in a season as a Piston, more so than the other few years combined. It's been a rough go of things. They've more than surpassed our expectations. They're going to double their win total, clearly. So, I mean, it's been an impressive run, but it all starts with number 2, the former first overall pick, in Cade Cunningham, who is getting recognition for being a potential all-star. He is putting up fantastic numbers, all of which are in the all-star territory. It's not just a case of, first overall pick plays well, let's give him some notoriety. Like, he is putting up all-star numbers, averaging 24.5 per game, 9.5 assists per game, something in the territory of 6.5 rebounds per game. He's playing fantastic, and it's leading to wins for the Detroit Pistons, who are 7 of their last 9. They're playing fantastic basketball, DJ, and it's at the right time because we're nearing that trade deadline, and that gives them options to decide what they're going to do in the back half of the regular season. But, I mean, just talk about what Cade Cunningham's doing and how it's making such a monumental impact on this team.
No, he's just playing basketball. I think that's kind of the best way to put it.
It's almost like he's just really good at it.
I mean, yeah. But, the best way to put it is he's carefree and loose. Like, he's just out there playing basketball. All he cares about is trying to win. Like, that's it. He just wants to do what it is that he's there to do, which is try and facilitate this team to a victory. If it's scoring 1,000 points that night, he's going to open up the bucket. If it's, facilitating for others and getting them buckets, he's going to do that. If he's got to bring the energy on the defensive end, he'll do that and ask for help. So it really is just him being a leader. He stepped into that leader role, that captain role of this team, and he's like, look, if we're going to be good, it starts with me. If we're going to be good, it starts with us just putting in the effort. And it's paying off to a huge tune, to the point to where many are talking about him as not only an all-star this year, but possibly being the best point guard in the East. He has definitely lived up to that in terms of his individual play. And if you ask me, I think he's lived up to that as a teammate and a captain, and dragging his team alongside him and getting them to step up to where he needs them to be so that they can be successful. 21 wins at this time is something that I don't think anybody who supports the Detroit Pistons as a fan of could believe that we would be at this moment, 41 games into the year. Literally halfway through the year, they're over 500. Yeah, I don't think anybody would have believed that if you told them preseason. So I think he's doing a great job.
And like I said, the stats back this up. He has 7 triple-doubles on the season so far, and only one guy has had more in a single season for the Detroit Pistons, and he did it twice, and that was Grant Hill. One season he had 10, and another season he had 13. Like, that is the level that Cade Cunningham has boosted this team. But there's another aspect to this team that I don't know that gets necessarily the notoriety. Trying to put up some study for this and see what's going into the successes of the Detroit Pistons in 2025. I don't think it gets enough credit, the fact that they went out and got some veteran guys who can still ball, first of all, but second of all, have some experience winning and can teach the young core of players, hey, this is how we go about our business in the NBA. This is how we go about winning. This is how we go about being professionals, and this is how we go about doing things. And it's not necessarily because there was like an immaturity aspect, you've got 5 George Pickens type players out there or some type of thing. That's not what I'm getting at. But I was watching the Pat McAfee show the other day, and they were talking about how a lot of NFL players are falling into that trap of, being the guy your entire life, and then you make it to the league and nobody's taught you how to be a professional and how to manage yourself and how to go about things the right way. And so you're seeing a lot of teams that have a lot of talent falling by the wayside because they can't get their heads out of their own rear ends. And that's not necessarily to say that that is a direct comparison to what Detroit has been dealing with, but Detroit hasn't been winning a lot of games despite having a lot of early round draft picks. And outside of Cade Cunningham, it's been difficult to get a ton of production out of those guys, and even him to a point, but that had more to do with injuries. But when you go out and you get veteran leadership, especially guys who can still ball, because Tim Hardaway Jr. is doing his job, Malik Beasley's doing his job, Tobias Harris is doing his job, but I think that core of veterans really boosted this team.
Yeah, it has, but they're in a different role. I think a lot of times the veterans look at themselves as like the guy that's been there and done it, and is like going to be the piece that helps this team out. Like, these guys are just trying to help the young guys figure it out. Yeah. They're not trying to take over the team. They're not trying to be the star point. Like, Tobias Harris at the beginning of the year was the number 1 guy. And quickly that was dissipated because Cade Cunningham is the number 1 guy.
Right.
Tim Hardaway Jr., he turned into a 3-and-D guy. He doesn't really ISO too much. He doesn't bring the ball up the floor. He's there to shoot threes and play defense. They've all kind of settled into their roles, and they're helping the young guys really step into their roles as well. Cade Cunningham can now truly be a star because he has guys around him and he has to only worry about himself. Jalen Duren has really started to command the paint and be more of a presence down low because he's battling against Isaiah Stewart and Simone Fontecchio and Tobias Harris down low in every practice, every game. He's getting those minutes with support behind him from people who believe in him. And you see Ausar Thompson and Ron Holland really take over as the best defensive parts of this team because they have the ability to do so, because they only have to worry about grabbing rebounds, playing good defense, and pouring in 6 points, 8 points a night. They don't need them to drop 15 to 20 and be a third scorer. They just need about 8, and it works for this team. Malik Beasley now taking over and realizing, I was a backup behind Jay Nivey. Now I'm Jay Nivey. I'm the starter. I got to step into this role. So it's really just broken down how easy it has been for everybody to step into their roles and feel comfortable in them, and now they're starting to excel and move forward in those roles as well.
I just want to list off their losses since December. Milwaukee, Boston twice, Utah, Denver, Golden State, and Indiana on Thursday night. Those are all good to great teams, some championship contender type teams. But they've also also beaten some exceptional teams like the New York Knicks, like Minnesota. They've stayed in the mix, and they've shown that they can be competitive against anybody, because even that Golden State loss, just 3 points. The Indiana loss the other night, just 11 points. No matter what's going on with this team, they have looked fantastic, and especially since the turn of the calendar to 2025, they've looked even better. Saturday, or later today, I should say, the game against the Phoenix Suns has been moved up at LCA so that fans can potentially enjoy the Pistons matchup with the Suns and the NFC divisional matchup in the playoffs with the Lions and the Commanders. Then they're going to go on a 5-game road stretch. They've got Houston, Atlanta, Orlando, Cleveland, and Indiana before closing out the month against Dallas. That's pretty interesting stretch right there, where we can learn a lot about the Pistons before we get to that February 6th trade deadline. I mean, is there any concern for having that many road games in a row at such a crucial spot in the season? Or what do you anticipate we're going to learn about Detroit with that type of situation ahead of them here on the schedule?
Whether they're going to be able to make the playoffs or not, or at least make a push for the playoffs end season. I think what happens over the next 5 to 6 games as they get ready to head into the All-Star break in just about 3 weeks, if they're not close to 500, above 500 at that time, it's going to be tough for them to make a push to get into the playoffs or in the play-in, which I think they are right outside of at this very moment.
I think they're around the 6th right now.
Or
I think they're actually like in prime position.
Yes, they're 9th right now, so they are in the play-in, but if they're not hovering around this same 500 mark or better, they're going to have a really tough time being in that top 10. So I think we're looking for them to stay consistent with how they've been, and for them to really make a push late season in April, or end of March to into the beginning of April, to find themselves at least in the 7 to 10 range, if not higher.
Last week I asked you a similar question. You were a little bit more conservative about it, but any change to the idea of what the Pistons should do as we get closer? I know it's wholly dependent on what happens over the next 6 games, but is there any change to the idea that maybe they should go get somebody that can push them over the top and make that playoff run this year, rather than stocking up on assets or picks or taking on a salary to help out a team and get some assets that way? Any change to that? Because everything I've seen has been ultra conservative, but I think there's something to be said about being aggressive. It was kind of an aggressive offseason in a manner of speaking. So any change in the opinion?
No. Because I just don't think there's really anybody to go after that is looking to come. I think that's half the battle, is like that person has to be somewhat interested. It's not that I don't think people are somewhat interested in Detroit, but if you're looking to sign somebody like that's like a move to push to do something in the playoffs, they have to have some significant interest. I don't really see that with the Pistons, but also, like I mentioned last week when we talked about this, core is important.
Yeah.
And this core is young. The last thing you want to do is bring in someone who's been in the league already that may mess the chemistry of that core up because of how they feel about themselves, egotistically. That is something to always keep in mind, is like how personalities and things mix in the locker room is huge. So I think that's kind of one piece. And the other piece is that there's so much young talent coming into the league over the next couple of years. Stocking up on draft picks or just having open cap space is not a terrible idea.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be similar to the idea of how Oklahoma City went about their rebuild to get where they're at. They have a young group of players that know how to win together. And if you brought in insert an NBA all-star here, it would probably make things go nuclear and it wouldn't work. Indiana's kind of built the same way too. I mean, it's almost like that's a really good idea. The fishing around for the legends of the game really wasn't a great idea, giving all the power to one guy, but I digress. It's going to be fun to continue to watch the Pistons. Cade Cunningham is playing lights out, and we'll continue to keep up with what's going on there. We'll come back and continue the conversation here on Mitten Madness 95.3 WBCK.
Detroit sports fans, Wolverines and Spartans alike, this is your sports show, Mitten Madness, with Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes on 95.3 WBCK.
Back here on Mitten Madness 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes. We are set to talk about the college football playoff national championship game that will take place on Monday. We'll do that in just a second. Do want to update a few things with the Detroit Red Wings. They're 21-19-4, and tonight they will play on the road against the Tampa Bay Lightning after having picked up a win over the Florida Panthers just the other day. That's incredible. But, I mean, you look at the Atlantic Division, every team in the division except for Buffalo is above 500 right now, and Detroit is at the bottom of the list. So it's an uphill climb, and they're going to have to continue to stay competitive within the division, but they've done a pretty solid job of that since the start of 2025 and the changes that took place at the head coaching position. We'll continue to keep up with them. We are almost out of college football, though, so we're going to pay a little bit of attention to a game that is going to be painful to watch for every Michigan Wolverine fan. And speaking as an Alabama fan, it's not too fun for us either. But nonetheless, a lot of people are going to hate watch the Ohio State Buckeyes take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who are a little bit more likable now with Marcus Freeman at the helm instead of Brian Kelly, who famously, left Notre Dame because he didn't feel like he could win a national championship. And now Marcus Freeman has taken one of the most impressive routes to a national championship opportunity to take on a red hot Ohio State Buckeyes team. DJ, I know you're not super crazy about either of these teams winning, especially a certain team to the south. But I mean, what are your expectations for the game? Not necessarily who's going to win. We're gonna pick the game, but just your expectations for what we're going to witness Monday in the first ever culmination of the 12-team college football playoff.
Honestly, I have no clue what to think, but I just hope that this game is blockbuster. Like, in my opinion, I want to go see another 48-42 national championship game that ends in like overtime or something. Like, I want to see the wildest game I can possibly see so I can go, you know what? One of my bitter rivals won, but that was a fun football game.
Right.
I want to be able to just look at highlights for 3 days and just be like, wow. We really saw a great football game. I don't want to see either team blow out the other because then it's just going to make me upset.
Right.
Because it's like, I had to sit and watch this horrible football game between two programs I could care less about.
Not to mention the narratives around the expanded playoffs that would come from that.
Exactly. So now it's just like, I just want to see a good game. There's going to be narratives that come out of this regardless of who wins. But I think the better the game, those, arguments and things are slightly different. If this game ends up being blockbuster and it's close and it's a 3-point game that they win by 1 or something like that, I think people are a little more acceptable of what we saw this year and maybe want smaller tweaks. This game ends in a blowout, there's going to be some crazy conversation that goes on.
Well, and consider that the last time these two teams played each other last year, it was a knockout, drag-out, close game that Ohio State won in South Bend 17-14, but it came down to the final yard, and Notre Dame just could not get that final yard, and that is why they lost the football game. But, I mean, Marcus Freeman has grown a lot as a coach since then, and Notre Dame has found a way. Now, a lot of people continue to give him crap about the loss to NIU. It was an ugly loss. Riley Leonard had moments throughout the season, especially early in the year, where he did not look particularly great. But going down the stretch, listen, Indiana only lost to 2 teams. And Notre Dame made them look terrible. Georgia, a lot of people thought was going to just breeze on to this game. They took them out game 1, 23-10 in their own backyard in Atlanta. And then Penn State did everything they possibly could. And I would argue Penn State was a lot better than I gave them credit for. They had a lot more playmakers within the tackle box than Notre Dame did. They just didn't have any wide receiver help, and that was a big reason why they lost. Notre Dame's got a lot going for them offensively and defensively to match up with Ohio State. Ohio State has just looked so dominant over the past few weeks throughout this playoff run. What does Notre Dame need to do to give you that game that you're asking for, that close game? Because Ohio State has dominated everybody they played. Even a 2-touchdown win over Texas seemed dominant. What does Notre Dame have to do to be that competitive and give us that classic national championship game?
I think Notre Dame just has to come out and play. They have to come and match the energy. I think that's going to be the biggest part. Is there's going to be ups and downs of the game, but if you can match the energy of Ohio State the entire game, you're going to be in a good position come the end. I think that's what a lot of people are missing about the Michigan game as well. Like, yes, that game was kind of given to Michigan in some points, but Michigan matched their energy the entire game. There were plenty of times where Michigan made mistakes and gave Ohio State opportunities to run away with that game, and they couldn't because Michigan's energy was there. You can look back at Ohio State's game against Oregon the first time in Eugene. Oregon matched their energy the entire game. It was a hard-fought battle, and Ohio State had to crawl their way and for everything that they wanted. Nothing was just easy for them or given to them, and they had to earn it, and eventually ended up in a loss. Games where you make Ohio State work and they're in it, you at least have a chance. Even the Texas game, Texas was right there. They had a chance. Well, sorry, I was thinking of the wrong game.
No. I mean, they had a chance. They just found ways to lose closer to the end. I think the game was a little bit more out of hand than the score indicates, but they did have a chance.
Yeah, and it's just a simple fact that if you're able to match energy, you will have a chance at winning the game.
Well, I think you're spot on, because look at who definitely did not match Ohio State's energy. Tennessee was not ready to go to the horseshoe. They were not ready. Or at least they didn't think Ohio State was going to come out with the energy that they did, because they did not match it. Ohio State was geeked out of their mind for that playoff game at home. Then Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Oregon, by far, the worst showing against Ohio State that any premier college football program has shown all year long. They got waxed in the first half of that ball game, and there was just no chance to come back in the second half despite their best efforts. And Texas, again, I think they had their opportunities. They just didn't have the right stuff, man. It just wasn't their year, kind of thing. I think if Notre Dame can kind of understand that, and understand that this isn't, it looks like an uphill battle because Ohio State has been so dominant in these playoffs. But look at the situation. You beat a team like Penn State. You beat a team like Georgia. You beat IU. You're 14-1. You're a higher seed than Ohio State. You belong here. This isn't an uphill battle. They're your equal, and you're playing for it all. I think if you go in with that mentality instead of, oh, my God, how do we stop Jeremiah Smith? How do we stop these running backs? How do we do anything against Jack Sawyer and that defense? If you go in with that mentality, that's why you're going to lose. Because further to your point, Michigan, they came out with that energy of we're their equal. This ain't our year. We're not very good, but we're their equal. We've beaten them the past 3 years in a row. We're going to do it again. If you have that kind of mentality, I think you have more of a shot against Ohio State than not. I would also argue a big part of this ball game has to be turn around, give the ball to number 4, give the ball to Jeremiah Love as much as humanly possible, so that they don't have the opportunity to throw the ball to their number 4, Jeremiah Smith, because that dude's game record, and I think he can really tear this game up if he's given a lot of opportunities, and that can cause a lot of problems. But we'll take a break, and when we come back, it will be time for our picks this week. Every NFL playoff game, the college football playoff national championship, and one little surprise to throw in there as well. We'll get to it next here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK.
95.3 WBCK.
We're back on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes set to make our picks for the week. DJ, how are those stand-ins looking? I haven't felt too confident since before Christmas. You keep telling me it's close, and I tend not to believe you.
Well, last week with the added game that we had coming over, which you did pick Ohio State in instead of Texas, so I made that correction.
Okay.
You were 6-1 last week. I was 5-2. That draws you yet one more game closer. You are 72 52-54, while I am sitting at 74-52. So just a 2-game lead. The playoffs can definitely help you.
You know, that's when I really hurt myself last year. I was trying so hard to come back, but I feel like I'm doing better this year. So try to keep it up. That said, I'm probably going to doom myself right out of the gate. I think you're going to see it coming. The College Football Playoff National Championship is Monday at 7:30, and it features the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Both teams looking to get their first natties in a long, long time. Over 10 years for Ohio State, 30 for Notre Dame. Great opportunity, great close to the 12-team College Football Playoff. The Buckeyes opened as a 9.5-point favorites that has slimmed down to 8.5-point favorites. ESPN's matchup predictor gives them a 55.5% chance of victory. The Buckeyes have looked dominant throughout the playoffs, whereas Notre Dame has done what they needed to do to make it down to Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, to play in this game. DJ, who do you have walking away as the first ever national champion of the 12-team college football playoff?
I hate this game. I hate making this pick, but I have to. And the smart thing about it is Will Howard, Riley Leonard. I pick Will Howard. Running backs for Ohio State versus running backs for Notre Dame. I would put Jeremiah Love above all of them, but when you think about the whole crew, Ohio State's is better. Receiving core, no question, Ohio State's is better. Their defenses are about the same, but I got more betters on Ohio State than I do on Notre Dame. Gotta go with that dreaded team down south.
I don't blame you, and you're making me feel dumber for what I'm about to do. But, you know, when you got somebody at home who's going to be screaming at the top of their lungs throughout this game for one team in particular, best not to be in range or within reason of being a part of the problem while the game is on. So I'm going to take Notre Dame, appease my girlfriend, but also I do think Notre Dame can win the game. I think what we talked about in the previous segment about your mentality coming into the game, and I think leaning on Jeremiah Love is the way to go. And let Riley Leonard run the ball. Don't force all these passes. He can throw when he needs to, but he's not going to keep pace with Will Howard and the way the Buckeyes operate. Notre Dame can win the game, and I think they will win the game, and it'll be close, but it'll be a fun one. I think we get that game you're talking about.
I hope so, because that would be so much fun. We're going to take a quick trip inside, getting on to the hardwood. Your Alabama Crimson Tide are taking a trip up to the Bluegrass State, Kentucky. The Wildcats, they're an 8th ranked team in the country. Your Crimson Tide are 4. They're both 14-3. They're both 3-1 in the SEC. Kentucky, 52.3% chance to win in comparison to 47.7% for the Tide. Rupp Arena at noon. So coming up shortly after you hear from us, will Alabama have enough to stay on the up and up after coming off a loss to Ole Miss, or will Kentucky be able to be coming out on top?
Yeah, I think Coach Nate Oates kind of has some pride in getting Alabama ready for those Rupp Arena visits, because Alabama doesn't have that kind of environment back at home, and you know, they're working through things to try to figure out how to create that environment and, you know, a new arena and all that sort of type of things to keep Nate Oates happy, to keep him in Tuscaloosa. So I think Nate Oates has a lot of pride in taking his team up to Lexington, Kentucky, and trying to put one on the Wildcats that they're maybe not expecting. Alabama does also get up better for those premier matchups, more so than those teams that are trying to catch up to the top of the conference. So I'm going to take Alabama, but not purely from a biased perspective. I think it's a mixture of how Nate Oates operates with his team. So I'm going to take Alabama.
I don't even think that's a biased pick, big dog. Bama's just good at basketball right now.
The 4th team in the country.
And they've been good for the last couple of years. You know, like you said, when it comes down to it, coaching has been phenomenal down in Alabama, and I don't expect things to change. Nate Oates ran his program a certain way, and it's going to remain that way. Kentucky burned me the last time I picked against them, but I think Florida's a little bit of frauds. They're ranked a little high. Bama's not frauds. They've been in this position for the last couple of years. That's what's expected of them, and I think they're going to come out on top again.
That was one of those games I got on you, right? Florida, Kentucky?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Surprise myself. All right. The NFL playoffs are down to 8 incredible teams. And I think almost every single one of them has a pretty significant argument for how they can win Super Bowl 59. That said, 2 of the teams playing in Buffalo, New York, the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, have some of the biggest and most profound arguments because 2 NFL MVP candidates are going to take the field. Mano y mano, it's Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen taking on one another. Don't forget Derrick Henry's in the backfield for the Baltimore Ravens, and don't forget James Cook is in the backfield for the Buffalo Bills because they're going to have to be useful because it's going to be cold, 18 degrees at Highmark Stadium out in Western New York. DJ, who you got advancing to the AFC Championship? The Ravens or the Bills? Good luck. This one's not easy.
Dude, I'm literally just throwing an arrow in the dark. What I am going to base this game off of is that the Bills are 8-0 at home this year. The Ravens have only lost 5 games. 3 of those games are on the road. And then the other piece of that is Lamar Jackson loses games to the AFC, not the NFC. I don't know if he can beat the Bills, who have clearly been one of the top teams in the league this year. It's going to be close, but I have to lean off of trends like I normally do and say that the Bills are going to win this game.
I begrudgingly disagree. I think that the Ravens have a run game that is just unfair. And this is the time of the year where your run game is what's going to set you apart. Josh Allen can throw the ball all over the crib, and Lamar's going to play sound football because I think he is playing the most comfortable style of football he's ever played in his NFL career. I think this is the most impressive MVP season Lamar Jackson has ever had. And you know what? For a long time throughout this season, I thought it was the Bills' destiny to go to Super Bowl 59. Over the last month, I've pivoted to the Ravens. As much as I hate to say it, I think the Ravens go in to Highmark Stadium and upset the Buffalo Bills to advance to the AFC Championship.
That's going to take us over to the NFC. No, sorry. We're going to stay in the AFC. We're going to knock both these games out one after another. The Chiefs are going to be playing host to the Houston Texans. The Chiefs, once again, are 8-0 at home as well. They've only lost 2 games this year. They're getting a 62.7% chance to come out of Arrowhead Stadium with a win at 4:30 today. Do they win, or do the Texans shock the world?
You remember that time last year where we picked against the Chiefs every single time in the playoffs?
Yes, sir.
We looked ridiculously stupid. I'm not going to make that mistake again. The Texans are very good. I think they'll put up a fight, but ultimately they don't have the firepower to stand up to that Chiefs defense. It's not the Chiefs offense I'm worried about. Chiefs defense is a big reason they're 15-2. I'm sticking with Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kansas City as well. It comes down to the fact that so many pieces of this Houston's offense, which would make them electric, are hurt or are questionable, so we don't know who's actually going to be out there. And I don't know if they have enough, like you said, to score on this defense to beat the Chiefs. So I've got the Chiefs winning as well.
Props to the guys who have been stepping up at receiver, though, for C.J. Stroud. John Mechie, one of them, Roll Tide. But they've got a whole bunch of guys out there that have really been stepping up when they needed them to down the stretch, because there was a time where they looked pretty rough. All right, let's get out to the NFC. We'll save the best for last. But first up is the Los Angeles Rams crossing the country to take on the Philadelphia Eagles at Lincoln Financial Field. It's going to be an ugly, nasty game. 32 degrees, mixture of rain and snow, and the Eagles are 8-1 at home and are 6.5 point favorites, 65.4% chance of victory according to the ESPN matchup predictor. DJ, who you got between the Eagles and the Rams?
This one's no question for me. Like, the Eagles hardly ever lose at the Link, especially the last couple of years. This game's at home. They're wearing midnight green. I've got the Eagles by, 7? But no, yeah, definitely the Eagles.
Cover. I'm with you. When I saw the weather, that confirmed everything for me. And it's not because the Rams are soft LA boys. No, the Rams are a tough football team. They're going to run the ball up the middle. Problem is that the Rams don't have an offensive line that necessarily matches up with what the Eagles provide. The Eagles have one of the most geeked rosters in the NFL, if you really kind of stare at it for a second. I'm going to stick with the Eagles. I think they are headed to the NFC Championship.
That's going to take us over to our last game. NFC Washington Commanders coming on over to Ford Field to take on your number 1 NFC Detroit Lions. They're 7-2 at home, 15-2 on the year, which means both their losses are at home, as this game is at Ford Field, 8 p.m. later tonight. Will the Lions be victorious, and will we be talking about them them in the NFC Championship game, or will Commanders' Cinderella story continue?
Well, I'm not so sure that Washington's a Cinderella story so much as they finally found their guy, because the bulk of the makeup of their roster is still mostly the same. They just got Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels can ball. Who'd have thunk it? It's why he won a Heisman Trophy. But like I said earlier, the Commanders are in the same spot as the Lions were last year. They're that team that, man, they're good. They haven't been here before. The Lions know what's at stake, and they know that they have to do it this year. These coordinators are out the door. They don't have any other choice. They've locked down some players, but if they want to take full advantage of being the best team in the NFL, they got to do it now. And that starts with executing a proper game plan against the Washington Commanders, where you turn around and you give the ball to number 5 and you give the ball to number 26 as much as you can, shrink this game and make them submit. If Gibbs and Montgomery do not combine for 250 yards on the ground, Detroit is not necessarily in trouble, but the game's going to be a lot closer than it needs to be. I'm going to take Detroit because I think they're going to do that. I think they're going to pound the rock and they're going to wear out Washington to the point where this can't be a shootout.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Lions as well. I think this one's plain and simple. The Lions are just that good, and the Commanders have looked good, but their weakness is what the Lions are strong at. I think they hone in on that, and then they're able to come out with a big victory and look to do the same thing next week, which gives us just about the same down the board. Chiefs, Lions, Eagles, and Bama. We both have. You've got Notre Dame. I've got Ohio State. You got the Ravens. I've got the Bills. We could be all tied next week.
Good.
So you get us into the weekend.
Hey, that's something to look forward to. All right. All 4 NFL playoff games will be here on the station starting at 4 p.m. later today, with the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Houston Texans, and then Detroit Lions playoff football here on BCK against the Washington Commanders. Kickoff for that game is at 8 p.m., and you can catch the game anywhere on the 95.3 WBCK app. Then tomorrow, coverage starts at 2:30 for the Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams, followed by the Buffalo Bills taking on the Baltimore Ravens. All 4 NFL playoff games right here on 95.3 WBCK, and you can listen anywhere on that app. So download it, take it with you, and keep up with all of the action if you just so happen to be busy somewhere around the Mitten State. All right, that's going to do it for us. We're out of here. We'll see you guys again next week, hopefully getting ready to break down an NFC championship, including these Detroit Lions, to see who's going to advance to Super Bowl 59. It's going to be a lot of fun. For Da'Jzon Hughes, I'm Jacob Harrison. We'll see you guys next week. Take it easy.
Join Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Miss the show or want to run it back? Stream Mitten Madness on demand on the WBCK app. Sponsored by airwaycashforjunkcars.com.